The core rules for the new edition of Warhammer 40,000 just went live. You can go and download them now and take a look for yourself over on warhammercommunity.com. But that's a lot of words to read. Could someone just tell me the big changes and I'll muddle through? We got you. The new edition of Warhammer 40,000, 11th edition for those counting, sees some changes to the core rules of the game. For the most part, these are evolutions, not revolutions. Quality of life improvements that will make your games better. There are no objective markers, no more circles. Instead, your missions will often require you to take, hold, or cleanse pieces of terrain across the battlefield. This immediately makes all games feel more narrative. You're not just moving to take a circle, you're assaulting a bunker, sanctifying a shrine, cleansing a vital location of enemy forces. As a default, all your units can now move through friendly units, so your guardsmen will now get out of the way to let your Baneblade get past. Rotating a model as part of its move is now free. You don't lose any of your movement to turn on the spot. Coherency now requires that every model in the unit be within 9 inches of all other models in the unit. This tends to come into effect on very big units like Orc Boys, Gaunts and Cultists, and means you can't spread the unit across the battlefield in a big line. For most units, you won't notice this change much. Resolving damage changes to allow for faster resolution of attacks. The game now assumes you're rolling all your attack dice for a given weapon together, a method that most players naturally adopted anyway. The difference is that before you roll saves, the player taking the hits assigns the groups of models in the squad that are taking hits first, and then the failed hit saves are assigned to them starting with the lowest rolls. In practice, this is a much faster system than the current system. It does mean that it's more common to see units slain but their leaders survive, especially if the character has a better armor save than the warriors they lead. If a unit is battle-shocked going into your turn, you must now test for them to become not battle-shocked in your command phase. This is a major boost to those units that can trigger battle shock on enemy units through abilities and weapons. You now pick the target of your charge after you have rolled. This is massive for combat-leaning armies, as it means you can set up opportunistic long-range charges, but also make sure that you have closer enemies in the event you don't roll that 10+ charge. It also limits how many times you'll have a unit move forward only to fail a critical charge and just be left standing around doing nothing. All pile-in moves now happen before any combats are resolved. This has the effect of making the move much more about getting your units into combat and less about using the move to shimmy your unit a little closer to objectives. Fight activation changes. The player whose turn it is gets to activate first. This means that units with fight first will now often fight after enemy units that charge them. Consolidate, like pile-in, now happens together after all units have fought. Terrain sees some big changes this edition. The standard bonus for cover is now -1 ballistic skill, effectively -1 to hit. This means it is useful against even very high AP shooting. There is also a bonus for shooting from an elevated position on a building of +1 ballistic skill, making ranged units very powerful when set up in commanding positions and effectively cancelling out enemy cover. Infantry, beast and swarm units can now hide in cover, unless they have fired a weapon recently, meaning enemy units cannot see them unless they come within 15 inches, great for keeping vital scoring units alive. No unit can be the target of more than one stratagem from each player per phase. This limits the power of certain units that were benefiting from multiple layers of rules, making them hit far harder than you'd expect or more durable than they had any right to be. A transport that finds itself surrounded by enemy troops can now disembark its cargo directly into combat, though doing so will see them battle-shocked and making some hazard rolls. Leaders continue to benefit from the abilities they grant to their unit, even if that bodyguard unit is destroyed, so your chaplain retains his +1 to wound even after the squad he is leading has been slain. When you arrive from reserves, you now only need to be 8 inches from the enemy, not 9. The charge rules though still mean you need to roll a 9 to make a charge in the turn you arrive. Flying moves are now much simpler. Rather than measuring up and over terrain or enemies you want to move over, you now just drop 2 from your move characteristic to move over any obstacle. Aircraft units now always enter the battlefield like reserves, and re-enter reserves at the end of your opponent's turn, ready to fly back for another strafing run in your next turn. There is a new ability on some combat weapons called Cleave that works like Blast does but in combat. Effectively, it makes the weapon really good at chopping up lots of smaller enemies. These are some of the more obvious changes in the new edition. We would still recommend you give the new core rules a read. You can download them now from the Warhammer community website.